Let's get into it. I'm not sure we have a definitive answer on how many blue bloods there are in the sport of college basketball. People argue about this sometimes, but North Carolina and Kentucky are undeniably two of them. Both played Tuesday night. Both lost again. UNC lost 92-85 at Wake Forest. That's some kind of basketball team Steve Forbes bought there in Winston-Salem. That's a pretty nice basketball team.
Yes. You weren't here for all that. Welcome back, buddy. Great to have you back on the pod. You missed all that, and we do not need to relitigate Jim Boeheim's comments, that's for sure. But yes, Steve Forbes has had quite an interesting few days here, and I was we'll get to UConn Marquette in a second, so I didn't watch any of the Wake Forest Carolina game, but from what I gather, they kicked real Tar Heel ass. Keep going.
Well, I wonder how much Tyree Appleby cost.
4 bags of apples. That's
When I read those quotes from Jim, I was like, all right, it seems pointless to say these things, but if you're going to say them, why are you saying Wake Forest bought a team? Like, there's got to be other examples in your own league that probably fall under that label a little better than the Demon Deacons, but whatever. My point was UNC lost 92-85 at Wake Forest. Kentucky lost 88-73 at home to Arkansas. These are the two schools that were picked to win the ACC and the SEC respectively. At this point, they seem more likely to play in the first 4 in Dayton. Deadleg, are you certain for sure the 2023 NCAA tournament is going to feature both North Carolina and Kentucky? And which one of those teams are you most concerned about right now?
All right. Put up the poll yesterday. Let's check the results here. Last night, asking who's more likely to miss. And that's actually right now, if you're watching, Nada put up the poll. Nada, they've got either Kentucky. Who's going to make it? Either just Kentucky or just Carolina. Both will make it or both will miss. So I think you got 4 options there right now. I only gave the option on the tweet machine, which team is more likely to miss. We're closing in on 2,400 votes here. Kentucky's at 51.7%. Carolina's at 48.3%. The nation is divided, GP. They are divided.
Hey,
but
you don't have to tell me.
I know.
I have cable news. I know the nation's divided.
Exactly. Let's take a look at the old. Do you know about Tourneycast, GP?
It's not in my bookmarks.
Yeah, you know what? It's on barttorvik.com. You have so much to learn. You can go to barttorvik.com/tourneycast.php, and it'll give you the percentages. Right now, this morning, Kentucky chance of making the tournament, 47.8%.
Oh, wow.
North Carolina, 9%. So North Carolina, but that's slightly less than 50-50. Woo! We're really back here, man. I didn't think we'd be back here.
How'd we get back here?
With both these teams. Before we continue, Nada, you got that quick 7-second clip from what Armando Bacot told the media in the scrum afterward. Play that if you got it.
I mean, really, I just told everybody, I'm not going to quit. If you want to be here on Thursday. If not, just go home.
This is the stage that North Carolina's season has reached. I was talking.
By the way, we at separate times this season, North Carolina's All-American big has said he told his teammates, if you don't want to be here, go home. And Kentucky's All-American center has told his coach, put in walk-ons with me if they'll fight. Both of those things happen this season.
That's correct. And also, Calipari said over the weekend, I need to play Damian Moore and Oscar Less. You're reigning National Player of the Year. And I did get home in time to catch most of the second half of that Arkansas-Kentucky game. And Shibwe, it's weird. I mean, it is weird that he is a shell of what he was last season when he was clearly the best player in the sport there. And it's not a good sign that Bacot's got to come out and say this when they are a veteran team. I was talking to a head coach in a Big Six conference on my drive home last night, and Carolina had just lost to Wake Forest, so he was kind of just. And this coach watches plenty of college hoops. He's not one of those coaches that only watches their team and their opponents. He watches a ton. And I'm not going to name the coach, but he did offer up. He's like, Caleb Love is not a good teammate, and you can tell when they play, and you can tell by the shots. He takes too many of them, and the coach wasn't saying, I'm not saying that's the reason that they're this bad, but they are not getting what they wanted out of him, and it might be affecting the team overall. It might not just be Caleb Love, but I think that's kind of undeniable. RJ Davis is the better player. Armando Bacot, he can only do so much, man. It can't all just fall on him, and there is a dynamic there that feels broken with North Carolina. They have been a team that has had fits and starts. They've had, they have a good week, then they have a bad week. Then they have a good week, then they have a bad week. So coming out of this, I know Kentucky lost at home to Arkansas and Carolina took the road L. So in a one-game view of it, okay, the Carolina loss is more understandable. I've got issues and concerns with both of these teams. I think the Carolina loss on balance is a little bit more disturbing overall. UNC is 1-8 against quad one. This is a coda. This is a redux of where we were a year ago. I thought UNC would come off the Duke loss, be able to handle its business. Both those teams actually didn't handle the rivalry well. I mean, Duke got just utterly flattened by Miami on Monday night. Duke's resume is not in any danger right now, but UNC is, man. 1-8. The quad one win is against Ohio State. That's like, I think Ohio State is second to last in the Big Ten ledger right now. If not, they're like third from the bottom there. And Tyree Appleby went off. Congrats on him. He actually set a record. He set an ACC record for free throws made and attempted in a game. He went 23 of 28. So good on him and good on Steve Forbes, because you know what? Maybe they wind up they got to win more, but maybe they wind up as a sneaky get in the backdoor candidate for the tournament. I have a little bit more concern about Carolina because most of these pieces were there last season. Like, what are we doing? Why are we here? It is now on the table. UNC, the preseason #1 team in the country, might do the unprecedented. Since they have seeded teams, there's never been a preseason #1 that missed the tournament, and that's now in the equation for UNC.
I wonder how much Jim Boeheim would pay for a Tyree Appleby these days.
Yeah, I know. He said 20,000. That was also part of his quote. 20,000.
Respectfully, I would be more concerned about the Kentucky loss at home to Arkansas than North Carolina losing on the road at Wake Forest. Although the Bacot comments post game and other, let's just call it speculation around the program is concerning. But I don't know if you know this. Arkansas didn't beat anybody on the road.
That times are changing. 2 in a row. Gamecocks and Wildcats. Shouts to Devin Downey. Times are changing.
Arkansas, here's Arkansas on the road this season. Lost to LSU, lost to Auburn, lost to Vandy, lost to Missouri, lost to Baylor, then beat South Carolina, and then beat Kentucky. So if you're Kentucky, you just got smoked at home by a team missing its best NBA prospect who hasn't beat anybody on the road all season other than a dreadful South Carolina team. That's problematic, particularly when you look at the upcoming schedule for Kentucky, because next up are a couple of road games at Georgia, at Mississippi State. Those could get tricky. Then you got Tennessee at home. Then you've got at Florida. That's obviously tough. And then you've got Auburn at home, Vandy at home, and you close at Arkansas. This could get real. Like KenPom project Kentucky to be 19-12 overall, 10-8 heading into the SEC tournament. If that's good enough, it's barely good enough.
What is your verdict right now? Then find us in 5 weeks. Kentucky makes it. Carolina doesn't. Carolina makes it. Kentucky doesn't. They both make it or they both miss. Right now, let's call our shots. What are we doing right now? Are these teams, 2 preseason top 5 teams, are they really both going to miss this tournament, Parrish?
Let's wager a Tyree Appleby on this. I will bet you one Tyree Appleby, and
I don't have any Tyree Appleby to give. That's the problem.
I will bet you a Tyree Appleby
I will
that.
bet. No, I will just bet you a bag of Connecticut-grown Empire apples. That's what I'll do. What do
No,
you got? Any apples down there in Greater Mississippi?
Yeah, we have apples.
Yeah, apple orchards.
I mean, I don't know. I never seen one with my own eyes, but we have apples at the grocery store. You can go get them. You know, what do I need an apple orchard for?
I need you in the orchard, trudging through, plucking from the trees, because that's what I'll be doing for you.
Boy, if you could ever figure out a way to grow Tyree Applebee's and then sell them to ACC programs, that'd be a business model, you know?
Who's going, who's not?
I think Carolina's going, Kentucky's not. And these two teams were ranked 1st and 4th in the preseason AP poll. Both got first place votes, and right now they're a combined 2 and 15 in quadrant 1 opportunities. That's unimaginable.
I mean, I just can't get over. You got Baycott talking to me saying, come see our practice or quit the team. Like, if ever there was a moment of actual true urgency, fight or flight, it's this for Carolina. It is. And the ACC is, here's the thing. Okay, let's bring up these schedules here. The ACC is not a good league. Now, it's got top half, bottom half. I get that. And there's a 3-way tie for first place. Shouts to Jeff Capel's Pitt Panthers, man. Right there with Virginia and Clemson. 3-way tie, 10-3 atop the ACC. But UNC right now is at 7-6. Here's the rest of its schedule. Home to Clemson, home to Miami. Got to have those games. Need to have them. Then, and there was once upon a time, Clemson had it never walked into the Dean Dome. But in recent years, it actually finally ended the drought and got a win. Then it's at NC State, projects as a tournament team. At Notre Dame, road, come on. You got to win that. Home to Virginia, at FSU, home to Duke. There is enough there for UNC to get it done, but you say they're missing it. You say they're not going to get, they're going to pick up enough losses.
I think North Carolina will get there.
Oh, you think they'll get there? Okay.
I think Kentucky will not.
There is no reason for Kentucky to be like this. There's none, man. There is no excuse. And they had won. I am acknowledging that Kentucky had won 6 straight SEC games, and in doing so had gone from a 10-6 team to a 16-7 team. But the way it lost to Arkansas is concerning because Arkansas is not full strength. It had struggled on the road. Defensively, this Kentucky team seems to be getting worse. Its remaining schedule is at Georgia, at Mississippi State, home to Tennessee, at Florida. What's Kentucky's record going to be in the next 4 games? You'll take 2-2. You'll take 2-2. And it's conceivable that 2-2 in that spot doesn't get you better than an 11 seed, 12 line maybe. Really? And then they're home to Auburn, home to Vandy, at Arkansas. There is actually plenty of quad 1 opportunities when you also consider the league tournaments for both of these teams to play themselves back into single-digit territory and not really make anything too dramatic out of Selection Sunday. That's still on the table. But I have wavering and dissipating confidence in both of these schools. You think Carolina's going and Kentucky's not making. I will say both get in. I'll say both get in, but I'll say both get in and they both narrowly avoid Dayton. They both make it, but they're double-digit seeds. They're like 11s, and they just barely crack. But I think we're going to get to the point here where the sickos are going to be like, no. Give us these 2 teams in the first 4. Just get it over with. Just put them there and do what you need to do. That's on the table. But I'll keep a little bit of optimism and say they right the ship. They have too much talent. The rosters are too good. The players are too good in theory not to get it right and to get it corrected. But you can build out arguments right now that both of these teams should actually be on the outside looking in as of this moment, just as much as you could say they're barely on the inside looking out.
Here's the problem with they have too much talent argument. While acknowledging they have lots of talent, 4 starters from a championship team and a team that played for the championship are back, and that's at North Carolina. And at Kentucky, you've got the reigning national player of the year. You've got a projected lottery pick in Casey Wallace. Like they should be good enough to get to the NCAA tournament. It's stupid we're even having this conversation on February 8th. Yes. The problem, of course, is that it's February 8th. Like most of the season is over. And this isn't a situation like at UConn where, hey, they looked great and then they started struggling, but maybe if they can get back to what they were, everything will be okay. North Carolina hasn't really been good all season. Kentucky hasn't really been good all season. They both had moments where you go, okay, maybe something flipped here. But broadly speaking, there isn't a single, I don't think, 3-week period where you watched either one of these teams and said, okay, now for a significant amount, 5-6 game stretch, these teams look awesome, like they were supposed to look. They have never at any point in the season looked like legitimate top 5 or top 10 teams. So expecting them on February 8th to just, well, there's too much talent, here we go. Like, well, where was the talent on January 8th or December 8th? These are fundamentally flawed basketball teams with talented individuals. I think that's the most accurate description of both North Carolina and Kentucky right now. These are big programs with talented individuals, but not very good basketball teams.
Yeah. I mean, in broad view, that is exactly what we're dealing with here. And, there's been all of the chatter and on this podcast, Kentucky discourse about the rotations, who's in, and you just look up and there are just stretches where it seems like he just doesn't have the right guys on the floor. Jacob Toppin has been unquestionably underwhelming. Sahvir Wheeler's actually out again. They've also dealt with some injury issues. That also has been part of it, but they just cannot get it going here. And it comes at a fraught time for Kentucky. I mean, you got to turn around and play at Georgia on Saturday. Georgia's not that good, but it's lost 6 of its past 7, but it is a program with a new coach and, a lot of new guys, and they have reason to believe that they can, put up a fight in a lot of these SEC games. So I find that to be a dangerous game on Saturday. And then they got to go to Mississippi State, was not as good now as it started, but it has proven it can beat good teams. I mean, Mississippi State's coming off wins against TCU and Missouri. It's going to play here Wednesday night at home against LSU. So, it's a little bit slippery upcoming for North Carolina. But yeah, this has become among the most prominent storylines this season. I mean, we're coming off last week was the first time in AP poll history that Kentucky, Duke, Carolina, and Nova, just that 4 combination, at least one of those 4 had been ranked in every single AP poll since the AP Top 25 began, or the AP poll began. It wasn't Top 25 back in the late 40s. Last week was the first time it hadn't been the case. So while Kansas has still been good, UCLA has been good. You mentioned off the top, there's no kind of universal set of blue blood teams. Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, Carolina, UCLA, Indiana, Villanova, Louisville would probably be my 8. I know there's going to be a couple schools just on the outside. Those, from a traditional standpoint, if you really dig into the stats and the history of those universities, the win percentages, the Final Fours, conference championships, all that would probably be my 8. If you want to knock off Nova and Louisville, say they're only 6. We had this whole conversation during last year's Final Four. Go ahead and find it. I was on a heater for like 15 minutes to start one of those episodes, so we're not going to do that again. But the point I'm making here is that a lot of these big time brand programs, and if you even want to include, like, Michigan State wasn't expected to be a top 15 team, but it's been up and down. That's been part of it. Kentucky and Carolina are the face of it. Kentucky preseason top 5 team, reigning national player of the year is back. We look up and they're fighting for their tournament lives in the second week of February. UNC makes a title run. It's a preseason number 1 team. Most everyone comes back. Preseason All-American and Armando Bacot fighting for its tournament life in the second week of February there. And I don't want to hear my last thing, and then we can move the hell on. I don't want to hear last year was a fluke. Parrish has said it multiple times on the podcast. We don't need to tell it to you again. The data empirically shows that for the better part of 2 months, North Carolina performed as a top 10 team in the country last season. It wasn't like they won at Cameron and they played a couple of ACC tournament games and then they flipped the switch. It is way more than that. If you actually dig into the numbers, Carolina, yes, it had a tournament resume of a bubble team at the end of January, early February, but it did switch that. And so I don't think what it did last season has really that much connective tissue to this season. And it does echo back to something that Hubert Davis told me in Portland. He emphasized this when he said, a lot of these guys played here last year, but I played on all these. I played in college. I played in the NBA. I've coached at Carolina here for a decade. They're different teams. They go home, they come back. There's different goals. Like, some of the guys are the same. This is not last year's team. This is a whole new venture, a whole new journey. I wonder if he didn't even realize how right he was when he was telling me that statement there. And now UNC sits on the precipice of really making history. Preseason #1 to maybe missing the tournament, but I think it's getting there.
I've had multiple coaches make that same point about North Carolina, which is everybody just says, hey, they brought back the same team. It's not the same team because the players aren't the same. I mean, the names are the same, but you can come back as different guys. And jokes aside, like name, image, and likeness money can cause issues within a locker room. I've had multiple coaches tell me that, like who's making this and where's this money coming from? And, that I don't want to say the closest thing we've had to this in the past 20 years, but among the things that we've had similar to this in the past 20 years is those Florida teams that won back-to-back national titles. And they were, they weren't supposed to win the first one. They won it. Then they were supposed to win the second one and they won it. And there were bumps in that season. But the thing I remember about that Florida, that Florida back-to-back national championship era was that those guys were best friends. Like they were legitimately like tight, lived together, ran together. One of the reasons they all came back is because none of them wanted to leave each other. And I don't know the locker room dynamics at North Carolina, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear all these guys aren't the best friends in the world. And Armando Bacot saying what he said after the Wake Forest loss, those are words from a frustrated guy who feels like everybody's not on the same page. It's one thing to come out as a locker room and say, I just talked to my teammates and I told them we've got to work harder, all those cliche things. It's not what he said. He said, if you don't want to be here, quit. Don't, I'm not quitting, but if you don't want to be here, don't come back on Thursday. That's not just, we got to be better basketball players talk. That's like, there's something not right there where they feel like everybody's not pulling in the right direction. And so that would be my concern about North Carolina, is that they don't just have on-court problems right now. They seem to have some off-court locker room. Everybody's not pulling the same way type of stuff going on. And to your point about being here again, and then we'll move on. On the morning of February 8, 2022, North Carolina was 16-7 overall, 8-4 in the ACC. On the morning of February 8, 2023, UNC 15-9 overall, 7-6 in the ACC. They are slightly better in KenPom right now than they were a year ago by about 10 spots. But from a record perspective, they're worse. And from a chemistry perspective, might also be worse. And so we'll see where it goes from here. They've surprised us before, but yeah, I'll be surprised this time if they flip it quite the way they flipped it last season.